And this is part 2 of working on the ministry instead of in the ministry. A really good perspective, really good concept.
To move it ahead. So the verse we want to focus on is from 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. And this is Paul, right, releasing things to Timothy. And he says, all the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will also be qualified to teach others. So then the question that we want to answer today, which we kind of have an idea of, but sometimes we don't actually do it, is who do we actually release the tasks in the ministry to? Who is it that we are delegating our responsibilities to so that we can be free to work on the big picture? And so in this passage, very clearly from Paul, we look for people who are reliable, people who've been there, right? People who are qualified to do the same thing. So really simply, look for people with high interest, high motivation, and high skill.
Right.
People who are committed and faithful. And this is where we go wrong, because a lot of times we begin to delegate to the guy that, you know, maybe loves us the most or has time or is just available and around and has said yes, but they may not be the most skilled or the most highly motivated. And so we're kind of putting them and ourselves in a position where this is going to be a frustrating event instead of a fruitful one.
Yeah, or sometimes the guy with the most money, or the guy that's liked the most, or any of those
The
kind
most
of things,
popular
right?
guy.
But these are the right reasons
Yeah.
to pick somebody. And I think about this a lot. Paul going through planting churches and then telling Timothy and Titus and those guys to appoint elders or guys that can look after these churches according to these specs, right? And it's also interesting to me that it wasn't Paul that found the guys. Right? He actually delegated that part as well.
That's true.
And I think if Paul was the guy that was recruiting the elders, he would have had to stay there and pastor those churches.
Right.
And that's a good reason why some ministries don't grow.
Right.
Because I do all the recruiting.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
I'm
That's
picking
a
the
very good
best
point.
guys. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And then, so the guys that you've delegated, they're not the boss. They're not the leader of those people. You are the leader of them. And so that again, that's working on it instead of in it, when you can allow people, mobilize people, right? Empower them to choose the people that they need. You give them the guidelines. Here's the kind of people to pick. And also another thing that I find very interesting about this, Becky, is these guys are freshly saved.
Right.
There was no churches there before.
Yeah.
It's not some guy who had 10 years of experience in the ministry or anything like that.
That's right.
It was pick them according to their integrity of their character.
Yeah.
Because if a guy has proven his character in the world, he's going to have the same character in the church.
That's right. Reliable men.
Yeah.
Qualified to teach. Yeah.
Right.
So it's who they are and their skill, right? Which I think is another thing that we kind of overlook, because we, especially in Christian circles, tend to value willingness over ability, which is true because you hear it all the time, right? Skill can be taught, but heart, you have to have it. And there is truth in that. Definitely, you want somebody who has the heart, because if you're just picking for skill only, you're going to also put yourself in a situation where you're going to have a mess.
Right.
We see that happen over and over again. But just because somebody doesn't have heart, if they don't have the ability and you're requiring something of them that they don't actually possess, then you're just setting them up for failure.
That's true.
Right? So there has to be a level of, you can actually do this. It doesn't mean you're the master and you have it all, but you've got to have the interpersonal skills, maybe the social skills, maybe you've got to have the, computer skills, the communication skills, whatever it is, whatever requirement is required for the person to do that job, they have to be able to possess some skill and ability.
Yeah, that's right. And it is true that skills can be taught, but a person with no skills can't be taught any skills. I've found that.
That's true. You have to have
They do. And it's interesting that people that are interested enough to learn something are capable of learning a lot more than people that aren't interested in learning.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we have to recognize that not everybody is ready for delegation, right? And just because they're around and they're available doesn't mean that they're actually the right one. So we have to be very careful about who we pick and choose to run the areas in the ministry, because when we release that area, and it doesn't mean that they're doing it all the time, maybe in the beginning, but when you begin to release some of your preaching, you begin to release some of the, whatever it is that you're doing, then that person begins to become the lead person, right? And so they have to be motivated in that area, and they have to be skilled in that area, because now other people are going to be following their leadership. There has to be a level of leadership there that they already
Right.
possess.
And the biggest mistake I would say that we see right here
Yeah.
is that as a leader, I think we don't have any of those people.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The truth is, you've got lots of them. You're
Yeah.
surrounded by them, and we just need to. We need to get past the familiarity that we have with people,
it's true.
and look at their character and the skills that they're developing and what they're learning and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times that familiarity. Well, Jesus said it right. Prophets without honor in his own country,
Yeah.
and that's just said, well. He did a miracle, and they're all like amazed and everything. And then they said, "Yeah, but we know this guy.
Yeah.
This is Mary
Yeah.
and Joseph's son. Like, that's
Yeah.
not going to work." And so, to be able to look past that, and I think that's a real key thing for a guy that has a perspective to work on the ministry,
Yeah, that's
is
right.
able to actually, what would you say, like, teach yourself
Yeah.
or force yourself
Yeah.
to recognize what's real and what's potential in people around you, rather than what you think they might not be able to do or they
Yeah,
might fail at,
that's
or
true.
anything like that.
Yeah, and I think that comes, because there's different levels of relationship we have. Some people, they're more just meant to partner, right? They come alongside, they help us, and we show them how to do things, and, they can get the job done to a certain degree. Like in worship, for example, we show them how to make a set list, how to pick the keys to the song, and how to communicate to the band, how to plan the practice, and all those kind of things, until they're ready to actually handle the responsibility. But just because they're partnering doesn't mean they're actually ready for that level of leadership, right? So we have to be able to discern, right? You see the potential in people, but you also have to be able to discern and see what they're capable of handling at that moment, at the same time. But it does come from having the attitude of, I'm looking for value in you. I'm looking for the gold in you. I'm looking for God's ability in you. And if you have people that you always have to sell the vision to, join us on this thing, you want to be part of this team. Yeah. Don't you want to evangelize your city? Those are the absolute wrong people to actually begin to, try to release and train up, because you're always going to have to sell them on
Right.
what they need to do.
Right.
You want to look, the first value that people need to have, the first thing that you notice in them is a willingness to participate in what's already going on, right? And then the second value you have to be able to recognize in them is the willingness to try, to learn, to be a part, to fail, and to, try again. If you can see that in people, then you can see people that you can actually pull, more abilities and giftings out of.
Yeah. So I think what I would do in a practical sense is write down the names of the people around you
Yeah.
that are the slightest possibility of being someone that you can delegate something to, and then just
job.
go through make a little mental note or whatever, make some little scratch notes or whatever, what you see in this person, the potential and that kind of thing. We've got to do something to break past
Yes.
our inability to see what's in the people that we're
Yeah,
familiar
that's
with.
right, yeah. And I think sometimes that comes with asking people around you.
Right.
Who do you see?
True.
So
Yeah.
just some very practical things when you're beginning to look at people, to begin to release some of those tasks, free yourself up from some of those jobs. Okay, number one, have faith in the person to whom you delegate. If you've chosen them, then have confidence in them. And then number two, just release and absolve yourself of the desire of doing it better. Because they're only going to learn as they begin to do it, right? And number three, relax and let go of your way of doing things.
Yeah.
I used to say this all the time to people. It's not just what the job is, but it's also how the job gets done. That's only true if you're still the boss of that job. But if you've given that job to somebody else, now it's up to them how that gets done. You have to completely lay down the how that gets done. And it drives me crazy. This happens to me too. When somebody gives me a responsibility, right? For example, like, hey, lead worship for this thing, but here are the 5 songs that you can lead.
Yeah.
I'm like, then lead worship,
Yeah.
And it's not that you have an attitude with getting any kind of direction, but then why make me the leader if you're not going to let me choose? It's like, give people the freedom, right?
Yeah.
And then the fourth thing that you have to learn is to be patient. It's going to be slow going in the beginning. People are going to be slower than you. And don't rush them, because that's part of the whole putting the pressure on people that they don't need from you. They don't need you to rush them. They need you to encourage them and help them. Pretty soon they're going to be better at it than we are. So just be patient in the process. And then also teach people to have that that eye and that understanding of you want other people around you to be able to do the same thing that you do. Those that you're beginning to give responsibilities to, get them to begin to see the same way. You want to train it in the beginning stages, right? How to look for people who you can already begin to have run alongside of you to begin to replace you, so that you have the freedom to do the thing that God's called you to do. If you have to travel halfway across the world and spend 2 weeks in Pakistan with Pastor Peter, you have the freedom to do that because you have people that can church, that can lead, that can minister, that you trust, and you can be free.
Yeah. And really the difference is in our perspective, the honor in perspective. Is, are we trying to present a perfect looking ministry?
Right.
If we are, that's when I feel I have to do everything.
That's true.
Or are we trying to present an opportunity for people to connect and grow and have an opportunity to rise up in leadership? And I think there's been such a push over the last couple of decades that take church services, for example. We want everything to be perfect. The transitions are smooth, the lighting, the sound, and that's great. But a lot of times what happens then is, if I come into a church like that and I see everything is just so smooth and perfect, there's nobody says or ah or anything when they're I mean, and I'm like, there's no room for me here. You know, I can be a spectator, but I'm never going to play a role in this place because you have to be perfect.
That's true.
And so don't even think about trying to present a perfect looking ministry. Who are you trying to impress? But think about, like Jesus, like Paul, let's find ways to bring other people in and release them into the ministry so the thing will really grow. God will honor that, man, when we put our importance not on how good we look, but on how good other people can look and how they can grow.
And we have a lot of leaders that do this really well. And so if it's something that you haven't been able to do yet as a leader, then we can ask, you know, from our leaders in our nations that are doing a great job, and how did you begin to do this? Because we've seen churches being handed over, we've seen ministries being handed over, and it's just propelled them into the next level of fruitfulness. And so the encouragement isn't that, you know, everybody needs to do this or we're sucking. The encouragement is, if you know that God's calling you to take your leadership skills to the next level, to push ahead the things that God's put on your heart, then you have to free yourself up more to be able to work on the vision, right? And releasing people is always going to be a lot of work, but that's where multiplication comes. And I think the thing I want to end off with is that Jesus did not have a plan B. He had his 12 disciples, and that was it. That was plan A. And I think a lot of times as leaders, we kind of think like that, like we've got a plan B. We'll try this guy. If it doesn't work, then we'll try that guy. If it doesn't work, then we have to have just a plan A. You are the person that I am training, that I'm delegating to. You are the person that I'm committed to. There's no plan B unless they walk away, right? Judas walked away. That's up to him. No problem.
Right.
But the plan A is the people that God's already given you in your church, in your ministry, the people that have partnered with you, that are committed to you, they are your plan A. And there's no plan B. And so let's be sincere and, what's the word, like, you know, specific, like have a plan of action to see people grow so that we can be free to move into the next levels.
It's awesome, Becky. So run with it. Work on the ministry, not in it.